What's happening internet? J Game Dude here, and I have a quick question to ask you. Do you like fighting games? Because I sure am a fan of fighting games. I'm god awful at them, but I do like playing my fighting games. Whether it be Blaze Blue, whether it be Dead or Alive, whether it be... I was going to say Mortal Kombat, but I realized I'm not actually really that much of a fan of Mortal Kombat. I like Tekken and Street Fighter. Sure, I like these sort of franchises, but Mortal Kombat less so. I'm just more of a Blaze Blue, sort of Dead or Alive, In-Birth EXE type of guy. I'm more of the Arc System Works fighter, so fighting games that were made by Arc System Works specifically. They're a lot, faster, a little bit more difficult to get to grips with, but once you do, it is actually surprisingly satisfying and a lot of fun, especially when they give you some really good stories. People say Mortal Kombat has a really good story, but I think Blaze Blue kind of did a better story in its from Calamity Trigger to Central Fiction. I think that was a better story than what Mortal Kombat is doing, but I digress. That's all just kind of me being a little bit pedantic. Though with all of that being said, Tekken 8 has added a battle pass. And this is also on top of there being microtransactions, on top of there being season passes, on top of that being an in-game store that requires a completely separate what's it called? Like a completely separate premium currency as well. So on top of all of that, there is also going to be a battle pass that is also separate from everything. And as the title says for this article, fans hate it. So effectively, no matter what happens, people are going to hate microtransactions. And yes, microtransactions do suck. And for the longest time, fighting games have been asking you to pay extra money for more fighters. That has really sort of started happening after the halfway point of the PS3 generation. I think the earlier PS3, it was kind of fine with, say, stuff like Soul Calibur 4. Soul Calibur, that's actually another fighting game series. Though I suppose that's also more so in line gameplay-wise with like a Tekken. But I digress. I think Soul Calibur 4 was fine. That didn't have any downloadable content, so any game during that period of time and before, you would not be expected to pay extra money for more characters. In fact, you'd actually play through the game to unlock more characters, or all of the characters would be unlocked up front. It just depends on what franchise, what series, and what edition of that particular game you are wanting to talk about. So this is the battle pass in question. So during the specified period, players can increase their level by completing daily and weekly missions in online matches, allowing them to obtain various items. So this is one of the updates that was made during the Tekken live stream that was happening. And so this is called the Tekken Fight Pass. Still though, I'm not gonna lie, I dislike cosmetics in games. I don't like using it myself. Other people do. And because those other people do, I feel like that's what's kind of added to a lot of people creating or adding, what's the word for it? Vanity. Adding a bit more to the vanity of the game behind paywalls and things like that, which is really, really unfortunate to kind of know and see. I don't think there's much more in terms of, yeah. So now, Harada, the director of Tekken 8 and the Tekken series as a whole, had actually come out and said in a in a tweet, he said that in order to keep up with the cost of keeping a game alive like Tekken 8, it's more than 10 times the cost than it was in the 90s, and more than double the cost of keeping servers alive since Tekken 7, which would have been about 2015, 2016, roughly speaking. I might even be wrong about that. But since Tekken 7, yeah, he says that it takes double the amount of time to double the amount of money to keep servers alive and keep things like new content being added in, trying to make everything look as good as he can, trying to make everything play as well as he can. And that's kind of his sentiment. And while game developers and stuff agree, it's generally frowned down upon, because if you have to go that far to monetize a game like for example Tekken 8, where you already have, again, like I said before, season pass, microtransactions, the premium currency, and a battle pass. You're kind of going a lot of the, you're going a bit further than I think a lot of other people would ever consider viable. Harada might try to be, well, he generally tends to be or is a good actor in these sorts of parts, but there's a lot of people who are going to look at that in the games industry and think, well, if Tekken can get away with it, then why can't I? And EA was always kind of the tool that everyone looked at as like, that looked down at, frowned upon at, or just dismayed at whenever EA would do something to do with more microtransactions. And that specifically happened more so during Star Wars Battlefront 2, if I remember correctly, with the not the battle pass, loot boxes. But yeah, so it's really just sort of setting a precedent for like what other people are going to try and get away with, that other, Tekken is trying to do. And even if he might be right, there must be something wrong with the way the game industry is being run, or that too much money is being spent in places that it really shouldn't be, because of how costs are ballooning, that potentially there may be leading to some sort of expense that is not actually adding quality to the game or life to the game, when things could be moved around a bit more. But I don't know anything, so it's definitely not worth listening to my words as far as development goes. Obviously, like, he knows better because he is the director of the entire franchise. With that being said, it's just interesting to know that this is what's happening. What does the future of gaming look like? Should games just... But the thing is that if games did look worse and were shorter in size, that could be a knock against those games when looked at from a critical perspective, and so they would get like lower Metacritic scores, lower other stuff like that. But then you have games like Balatro that are doing incredibly well at a 93 on Metacritic, I think, which just came out this year, which is a roguelike card game effectively, or a roguelike kind of sleight of hand game, so to speak. But yeah, like, that game has been doing exceptionally well. So I suppose it's just interesting to see if the game is unique and fun enough, it will stand on its own 2 feet without having to look like the greatest thing ever. So I suppose maybe I'm just being a little bit pedantic with that last statement, and maybe things will actually just be better if people made worse games that are shorter, that, cost less ultimately in the end. But if something costs less, then the extra money will likely be backfooted to the CEO of whatever company is actually in charge of making the game that made that game cheaper, so to speak. But maybe I'm just kind of looking into things a little bit too much. Corporate greed has really taken over this industry a little bit too much, especially with like all of the speeches that have been made by people who've made or were a part of the crew that made Baldur's Gate 3 specifically. So people from Larian, and especially Sven Vink, who has been going on like a tour, almost like a press tour, except that he's been winning tons of awards for Baldur's Gate 3, him and his team. And so just talking about like how corporate greed has kind of ruined the gaming industry and things like that, and the interest, corporate interests and things like that seem to be paramount as such. So yeah, definitely something worth looking at or looking into if you ever get a chance. It is absolutely fascinating to hear his words regarding all of this, and also his cohorts' words as well. They do not hold back at all. But with all that said and done, let me know what you guys think about the addition of an additional level of microtransaction on top of what we've kind of already discussed. And hell, you know what? Tekken 8 also had a $300 edition as well. I don't know, it's just worth mentioning that too as well. But yeah, let me know what you guys think about all that in the comments below. Like the video if you liked it. Subscribe to the channel. I'm aiming for 200 subs by the end of the year. With all that said and done, I do upload every day, so I'll see you guys tomorrow.